Okay, so we're recording.
It's rolling.
It's rolling.
Exciting.
So, hello everybody. My name is Tessa McWatt, and I am the author of Where Are You, Agnes?
And hello everybody, my name is Sara Lundberg and I am the author of, this is the Swedish version, but you can have it in English too. It's The Bird in Me Flies. The Swedish title is Fågeln I mig flyger vart den vill.
Great. So Sara and I are just going to have a conversation about our books because they're both coming out with Groundwood Books, and they have a lot in common. So we're going to read a bit from each other's books. So I think we'll start with Sara's book, and I'm just going to bring it up on the screen so that you can see it with us. This is a section in the middle of in the middle of Sara's book, and we'll talk about what the book is in a minute. But it's based on Swedish artist Berta Hansen's diaries and letters, and it's a beautiful story about a young burgeoning artist. Papa is out in the field with some men from the village. I am at the stove. The pea soup is bubbling. Soon everyone will take a break and will come in hungry. I ought to set the table now. I ought to wake Niece up and feed him. I ought to sweep the floor, but I'm stuck. I close my eyes. I see Mama. I am little and she's warm. Something snaps. I don't know how I dare. I know everyone will be angry. I leave the stove, get a book, and sit down. Before long, there's burning smell in the house. Someone shouts for me, but I pretend I don't hear. Suddenly, Papa is there. He snatches the book out of my hands. He stands there, shaking with anger. I ought to say I'm sorry, but I can't. Instead, I hiss, I'm going to die, just like Mama. I'll die if I stay here. After the pea soup, nothing is the same. Papa is so quiet. Julia hasn't gone back to Karlskoga yet. There's been so much to do since the funeral, and she's had a cold. But after the summer, I'm leaving, she says, pinning the waistband. It's obvious that she's longing to go. Soon it'll be graduation. We managed to scrub away the blood stain. Maybe it's just a tiny bit visible, but only if you know it's there. There are just a few details left, and then the dress will be done. Julia looks at me. Oh, you'll look lovely. She sounds just like Mama. I sneak away to the big gully again. The blue clay gleams at the bottom. I dig. The clay turns into shapes without me deciding anything. It just does. And suddenly there's movement against my palms. A little bird heart that has started to beat. Wings that are trying to get free. And I'm scared that I'm holding it too tight, so I open my hands, then it flies. And that's my favorite painting in the book, so I just thought I'd leave it there. And now Sara's going to read a bit from Where Are You, Agnes?
Yes, Where Are You, Agnes is a beautiful story about the artist Agnes Martin. Agnes Martin became a world famous artist, a painter of abstract art. And this is a story of her childhood and her relationship to her grandfather, and becoming or learning through her grandfather to see the beauty in the world, in things, in details, and I think it's the start of understanding the abstract art that is very spiritual, and it's about love and beauty. And I'm going to read. It's also about loss, and I'm going to read the part of the story where that ends with the grandfather sort of, well, disappearing, or not. He dies in the end, and that was very moving to me. And how the loss and the impermanence in the world, losing loved ones, and how that can be the start point of the wound from that can be the start point of an artist's life as well. So I'll read, and then we can discuss the similarities and differences between our books. At her new school, Agnes wrote curved letters on the blackboard in chalk. She loved the feeling of making her name, but the next morning at school she felt sad. Why do things have to disappear? Agnes asked her grandfather when she got home. Her grandfather thought for a long time until it seemed he had forgotten the question. Let me think about that one, he said finally. Her grandfather looked a little pale, so she didn't want to bother him anymore. It had been a long time since Agnes had felt the rainbow. She wanted the feeling again, so she went back to the park with all her colors. That's ugly, her brother said. So Agnes painted the tree again. That's a bit ugly, her sister said. And she painted again and again. Where are you, Agnes? Her mother would call, even when they were in the same room. Agnes showed her paintings to her grandfather, and his eyebrows told her that she was getting closer. But how do I paint a real tree? She asked him, as she held on to him tightly because he seemed so wobbly. She watched his eyebrows as he thought for so long that it seemed he had forgotten the question. The tree won't be there forever, he said finally. It could be chopped down. It could get rotten and die. But you will remember the tree and see it in other places. But how? She asked. Look here, he said, pointing. And there. And there. Something real is felt here, he said, putting his hand on his heart. So the thing you love can appear everywhere. In school, Agnes learned about fractions and the solar system. She liked to make equations and to think about the moon. Then one day, when she came home, everything was different.
Thanks, Sara. That was a lovely reading.
Thank you. It's nice to hear the story read by someone else, isn't it?
It is. It is. I wanted to just, pick up on one of the things that you were talking about in terms of my book, in terms of your book. You know, it's about a Swedish artist, and it's a real story, but it also has really contemporary resonance to little girls, young girls in our society, and this idea of feeling outsider and feeling kind of, I like when this idea that feeling ridiculous. And I just wondered, what about Berta Hansen's story appealed to you, and why you chose that, and how you made that a kind of more contemporary message as well?
Well, the Berta Hansson, compared to Agnes Martin, for example, Berta Hansson is one of those Swedish female artists that are forgotten. Not many people know of her. She was established as a painter, but then, as many do, sort of disappear, and which is the case with many female artists. So my publisher and I, my publisher is also a graphic designer, and we discussed, we planned on making a book about the north of Sweden, which Berta Hansson is from the north. And so this was a collaboration. Deciding to just pick Berta Hansson was a mutual decision between her and me. The reason why I felt that I could do something right about her was because I recognized myself in her. Even though I'm born 1971, my parents never stopped me from becoming an artist. I still can recognize the struggle that she went through. And I'm very curious about, she's a female artist that broke the, what do you call it in English, when then somebody steps up the path or makes the path so that other can come after. I feel that Berta Hansson is one of those women. I wouldn't be an artist if she hadn't been before me. So it's this feeling of gratitude and also curiosity about how is it to grow up and be restricted like that.
Yeah. No, that's very clear. That's really interesting that you think that paved the way for your art, because your art is so beautiful in this book. And I think I'm sort of skipping ahead a little bit to a question that I wanted to ask you about being the writer and the artist. And you've kind of, my work was illustrated by someone else, but I think there's such a different relationship to the work if you're dealing with an artist and you are the artist of your own story. It must be a really different engagement with the whole story, and I'm just really interested in that.
Yeah, I usually work with the text first and then with the images, but it's this weighing of what should be told in the text, what should be told in the image, and what can be silent, what can be just an image, and the silence speaks a lot, that it's the only image. But I feel that with your story too, that you and the illustrator seems to have collaborated very well, because there's a lot of image talking. The image is talking a lot, and the text is some spreads the text, like the last spread, like when the grandfather dies, is very strong. You never say that he's dying, but it's so clear with the image and the text. How did you work together with that?
Really interesting, because I wrote the story first and then sort of had a sense of, like you say, the silences and when would be what's enough with text and what needs to be illustrated. And this is my first children's book that I've written, so for me that's a huge step to think about not having to say things, just letting collaboration and letting someone else fill in the silences. And so I really had to think of, so I wrote a draft that was a suggestion of what was going on in certain places. But then when the illustrator, wonderful Susanna, came back with suggestions, it even affected what I had written. So we kind of, I had to moderate some bits because the image was much stronger than writing it. The word wasn't as strong as the image, so I took some things out. So she was really wonderful in grasping the feeling that I had for Agnes's work, but also her suggestions about what would work visually over what works in a text were really great. So I felt really honored that someone got my text so well,
Fantastic. So when you were working, the text and the images went back and forth between you, and she would say, like, you would collaborate on, we can take this out in the text and add it in the image, or?
So directly, it was more that, I wanted to give her, she really caught the spirit of Agnes's art, and she's done a beautiful, and this is an Agnes Martin print behind me for those who don't know who Agnes Martin is. But she caught the feeling of what Agnes does, which is these lines and the kind of abstraction of emotion. And so that's what she's brought into it. And so I kind of let that just take over, because it's as you know, being about an artist, the art is the most important thing. So I just kind of let that take over, and she kind of adapted to what I had in mind, but then came up with her own ideas, and I was so thrilled. So it all worked beautifully.
And how why Agnes Martin for you?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I saw an exhibition at the Tate Modern with this piece and with others, and I was overwhelmed by how I keep saying to everybody, I stood there and I felt simultaneously excited and and calm, both at the same time.
Wow.
And I don't often sit in front of paintings that I react to so viscerally in two different kinds of emotions. And so I just thought I loved her. I knew of her before, but then I saw these paintings, in the flesh, so to speak, and I really got excited. And then I went to Groundwood Books and talked about wanting to do a kind of awakening of an artist, and Sheila Berry, who is no longer with us, but was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful children's book editor at Groundwood. She said, yeah, well, okay, so a book about an artist coming alive is into her art is one thing, but how does abstract expressionism come alive?
Exactly. It's difficult, and I think you capture it so well with this idea of beauty. It's so important, beauty and love, and how it goes together.
Yeah.
And to also that you can see something in reality, something like a tree or a flower or whatever, and you can still, and when you close your eyes, it's still there. I think that's
similar to what you deal with in your book, because there's a point where Berta asks, well, what do things really look like?
Yeah.
Really interesting, and it's kind of similar to the abstract question of beauty, like what does something really look like? And it's
yes, because there's also, from Berta was not abstract. She painted figurative human being, a lot of children and interactions and stuff like that. But for many artists, an artist is you have to learn how to see, and most of us walk around not really seeing. So doing art is opening your eyes and seeing.
yeah.
I saw a beautiful interview with David Hockney about this, the beauty in nature, the beauty that surrounds us all the time. The world is beautiful, and to really open your eyes and see it.
Yeah, there's a difference, isn't it, by just being in the world and then seeing it.
Yeah.
And how artists do that, how artists see differently.
Yeah, to take time to really study things.
Yeah. And I think that's what both of our books sort of are about, aren't they?
Yeah.
How you see and what you really see.
Yeah. I'm curious as to how much research you had to do, and if there are relatives that you had to contact and get the rights to actually do it. So how did that work out?
Well, we didn't. I didn't. We didn't. A lot of I did a lot of research on Agnes's life, and there's a wonderful book about her that I used, a kind of a biography about her that I used, and because there's nothing much in that book about her early life, I kind of had to invent this part of her life, and I knew that she was close to her grandfather. And so it's not, that I know that this is what happened between them. So I kind of, it's a fictionalized version of what I imagine her coming awake to her, to the sense of beauty that was so much in her later life and so much what she talked about. So it was using her own texts where she talks about beauty and what it is and how you engage in it, and then a little bit about her life story. Then I kind of put those two together, and because it's not, and because we don't use any of the her actual paintings in the book, it wasn't a matter of copyright. So it's kind of just allusions to her work rather than her actual work. So
Does she never had any children, right? But does she have, no,
her
any relatives that take care of her
she has a
legacy?
gallery in New York that runs her estate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to ask you is about the idea of death as a big part of your story, as
Yeah.
in mine,
Yes.
and what about that, and what about, we've both written for children, but we're writing about death, and what about that was important to you in telling the story?
Um, in Berta's case, I think she grew up on a farm and was expected to take over the farm, follow the tradition, and the father was a very kind man, but also very stuck in tradition and the way things have been. And the mother was sick in tuberculosis, which was during this time in Sweden, it was it was a pandemic, but it was an epidemic. Many families, including my own family, had somebody die in tuberculosis
Right.
at this time, in the early 1900s. Berta's mother was the only one who saw her, which is comparative to your story. The grandfather sees her and they have this special relationship. Berta had a very special relationship with the mother, and the mother saw her, and Berta has had this magical thinking that her art would help the mother, or that her making things and coming into her mother and seeing the mother becoming so happy with her creative, that there was this magic between them. And the mother dies, and I think the wound from that is, I mean, the sorrow, there's also love and beauty in the loss of a loved one, even though it's horrible. We all have to go through it. We all have to lose our loved ones sooner or later. That's part of life, and something that affects us for the rest of our lives. So yeah, I don't know what would have happened if the mother had lived and had been cured of her disease.
Yeah.
But it is a huge part of Berta Hanson's developing who she became.
Yeah. I love that one painting in when that we saw, with the mother and her kind of floating above, and how important that memory, like you're saying, the memory of the loss is a powerful engine of someone as becoming an artist.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's beautiful.
absolutely. But the same as you, when it comes to the truth or research, I also, it wasn't much to read about Berta as a child. So I knew that she was close to her mother. There are relatives that I could speak to. Berta didn't have any children of her own, but there are still people today that are related to her and that knew her that I could talk to. And there are letters. There was a lot of reading, but I did have to invent situations, and that's why I wrote it as I was, you know, in the, what do you call it in Swedish? We call it
In the
the
first,
me form, first person. Yeah,
yeah,
I wrote it in first person, so that I really could feel that I was her.
yeah, yeah,
I got close to her.
yeah, yeah. It's great.
And I also think that when you write these kinds of, it's not a biography, it's more like an inspirational story. You're inspired by the life of Agnes and the life of Berta. And so it's not fact, but the relatives of Berta Hansson that have read my story, uh, they say that it doesn't matter if this is the true, you know, everything is not the truth, but it is the truth. It is the truth because it is capturing Berta Hansson's soul, or whatever, you know, her story.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, that's
so
great.
I just find it interesting with this like notion of truth.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I think, yeah, I think that stories, and like you say, you took it on as yours, and I did for this as well. You know, so that
Yeah,
the story and the inspiration, and I think Agnes, I think would be very. I hope that she would be very happy that her idea of what disappears is still there,
yeah,
is really important to me, and that you know, her disappearing, not being, but is still there in my book, is also, you know, I think a homage to her. So
really, yes, I totally agree, and I feel the same. I can feel the same thing that uh, I can feel Berta Hansson smiling that this book was made, and it has been very well received and translated to many languages. So she's flying around the world with the story, and I think she's enjoying it.
oh, that's so lovely. I think
Yeah,
on that note that we probably run out of time, and that's a really good note to end on. um,
yeah.
it's so lovely to meet you and talk to you and read your wonderful book and see your beautiful art.
Oh, same to you, and so lovely to have this conversation. I wish we had longer time, but
Exactly.
next time.
Another time, yeah. Thank you, Sarah. I'm just
Yes, thank you.